Everybody's heard of Gateron Black Inks, Gateron Oil Kings, CJs. Gateron has really come up with some amazing switches in the last few years, but the ridiculously smooth CJs actually aren't my favorite switch that I currently own. Actually, it's a tie. Crystal Icebergs. A while ago, I reviewed them, and over time, I've grown to love them even more than I did when I first reviewed them. They're just so weird and so fun to type on. Why these 40-cent Aphelion switches? And what makes me go back to them every time that I take them out of a keyboard, I end up putting them back in? Well, it's not the housing, the smoothness, or the stem wobble that they happen to have. It's actually the spring. Crystal Icebergs use a 2-stage long spring, which makes the downstroke feel consistent on the way down just up until the last second, where the spring is at its most compressed, and then the upstroke is super snappy due to their length. And you know what? If you feel like linears have gotten boring to type on, I really recommend checking out spring swapping and putting some weird progressive springs into your linears and see if they're interesting again. And that brings us to this mysterious Gateron switch. That's right, we are reviewing the sister switch of the highly sought after Azure Dragons, the Vermilion Birds. I got these bad boys from my new affiliate, Lboard, and they're a limited run, so if you like what you hear, I advise you go grab them while supplies last and use code COLEY for 5% off any Lboard order. The only videos online about these switches are just sound tests, and there's not a lot of documentation on what people actually think about these switches. Why are people so obsessed with the Azure Dragon switches but not these? Is it the competitive market of linear switches? The fact that Shoobs endorsed the Dragons? Love you, Shoobs. Well, in my opinion, I genuinely think the branding is what did it. The dragons are just a sick name, and the colors are gorgeous on those switches. But once I got the birds in, they kind of look like little fireballs, and the look really grew on me. But looks aside, the Vermilion Birds, in my opinion, are what would happen if a Gateron CJ and a Crystal Iceberg had a baby. So the switch is of similar quality of a Gateron CJ. Just like the CJ, they have a palm stem, not a polished one of course, but this is still really solid. The housings feel good, they have a polycarbonate top housing and a nylon bottom housing. While the housings aren't the exact same as the CJ, it's still really solid and it doesn't need filming in my opinion, just like the CJs due to the minimal stem wobble. There's a little bit of east and west stem wobble, but north and south looks good, and overall I don't think it's enough to justify filming. I will say this is a huge improvement over the Crystal Icebergs. If you watch that video, you know that my only gripe with those switches were that they had a lot of stem wobble. So in that way, the Vermilion Birds solve this issue. The materials also result in a pretty smooth switch. Okay, not as smooth as a stock CJ, but really smooth. Definitely smoother than a cream, no contest. And honestly, better than your average stock linear. Springs are 18mm 2-stage springs with a 50-gram operating force and 67-gram bottom out. But in my opinion, these kind of trick you into feeling a bit lighter due to their even downstroke. This is where the Crystal Iceberg genetics come in with that fun spring. On top of all of that, these actually come factory looped. It's not as great of a factory loop job as the Invokee's matcha lattes are. However, those are kind of considered to be the best factory loop job ever. What you're gonna get in the Vermilion Birds is gonna be really similar to that of a Gateron Oil King. I think it's pretty solid and causes these switches to be absolutely fine to use stock. In fact, I wrote this script on stock Vermilion Birds. But as I use these switches, I realized that I really like them and I want to keep using them, so I thought it would be a worthy time investment to lube the whole batch. And I'm happy to report lubing these made them sound and feel more consistent across the batch. And they're actually slightly smoother overall. I used 2 of 5 grade 0 on the rails and the stems, and I bag lubed the springs. Here's a sound test to compare lube versus stock in both a clacky and a thocky build. So all in all, you've got this iceberg CJ baby. It's got the modern Gateron housing with the awesome iceberg feel. I would say the sound is in the middle in terms of the clacky-thocky scale, maybe a little bit more clacky than thocky, slightly clackier than the crystal icebergs themselves, but overall sound quite similar to them. Definitely less clacky than a stock CJ though. At the end of the day, this is a fantastic quality switch that I honestly think people are sleeping on. I don't know why, but these are actually some of the only Gateron switches that have two-stage springs, and they're both fantastic. If you want to get them, go get them. Links in the description, and don't forget 5% off with code COLI. Now, down in the comments below, I would really love to hear what switches kind of surprised you out of nowhere. Are there any switches that you've tried that you feel are kind of underrated? Let me know down below, and as always, don't be a stranger. Oh yeah, and if you made it this far into the video, please like the video. Please give me a like. And ring that bell. I would really appreciate it.